Do you love the look of a festive Christmas village display? Well, today I'll be sharing 5 different DIY ideas for creating a one-of-a-kind village that you won't find in stores. Plus, I'll be using inexpensive materials, so all of these projects are budget-friendly. Ready to make a beautiful and totally unique Christmas village? Then let's get started.
If you've watched many of my videos, then you already know that I love books. So I wanted to try making a small Christmas village using an old book. I opened the book to the middle and then brushed Mod Podge over the page edges on all 4 sides. I brushed over them a few times to make sure that I didn't miss any pages. Then I clamped the pages and let the Mod Podge dry for a few hours. To create a white, snowy-like base for the village, I cut out a piece of white felt, slightly smaller than the open book, and I rounded the edges, creating an organic shape. To attach the felt, I pulled it taut and hot glued the edges to the book pages. But I think spray adhesive would have worked well too. Due to the angle of the pages, I needed to hot glue a small wood block along the outer edge of the ceramic houses before hot gluing them to the book so that they would sit level. I just tried out different pieces of wood until I found one that was a good height. To help hold the houses in place and conceal any gaps, I cut out a skinny strip of felt and hot glued it around the base of the house and to the large piece of felt on the book. I cut some slits around the corners so the felt would lie flat. Next, I cut a small piece off the end of a cardboard paper towel roll. I cut the circle open and then trimmed it to a good size for a small bridge. I folded in the 2 ends about 1/4 of an inch where I would glue the bridge to the felt. But first, I cut up a few popsicle sticks with my miter shears, cutting them to fit the width of the cardboard. I hot glued the popsicle sticks to the cardboard and then hot glued the ends of the cardboard to the felt. You could apply a little antiquing wax to the popsicle sticks if you like. Next, I hot glued a few other village accessories to the book. I think most of them came from Dollar Tree, but I do like to use the miniature ornaments that Walmart and Hobby Lobby sell for small trees. To add the snow, I brushed white glue over the felt and on the house roofs, and then sprinkled on buffalo snow and some white glitter. At this point, I thought I was nearly done and just needed to add some twinkle lights. That's when I realized the holes in the houses to add lights were not on the back side, but on the bottom of the houses. I debated my options for a minute or two and decided to pull up the felt and just hope everything stayed intact. I drilled holes through the book in the spots where the houses had been and ran a strand of Dollar Tree twinkle lights through the holes and into the houses. Since some of the paper had ripped off when I removed the felt, I went ahead and cut out those torn pages and reattached the felt to the new top pages. I also needed to add some additional snow, which I sealed with a top coat of spray Mod Podge. Then I decided to add a Christmas phrase, which I printed out on cardstock and hot glued along the bottom edge of the open page. Then I sprayed the paper and the felt with adhesive and sprinkled on a little iridescent glitter. And finally, I sprayed on another coat of Mod Podge to seal everything and reduce shedding. I recently received a Balsam Hill catalog, and this large wood village really caught my eye. But then I saw the price, almost $300. However, it was on sale, but it still cost $239. So I decided to see if I could make something similar, but much cheaper. To create tri-level risers, I bought 3 pieces of lumber for less than $20. I bought a 2x4, a 2x6, and a 2x8, all 8 feet long. I cut the 2x8 board into 2 pieces, both 28 inches long, and then I joined them together with wood glue and a few brad nails. Next, I cut a 28-inch length from the 2x4 and glued and nailed it across the bottom of the 2x8s to make it 10 inches tall in total. This would be my tallest level. Then I cut the 2x6 board into 2 pieces, both 30 inches long, and glued and nailed them together. This would be my middle level. Finally, I cut a 32-inch length from the 2x4, and this would be my front shortest level. For the houses, I found this set of 12 on Amazon. I only paid $30.99, but it seems they've since raised the price by $2. The height and width of the houses varies, but the depth of all 12 is 4 inches deep, which is why I made the 3 risers 4 inches deep. Each house comes in 6 or 7 pieces, and they snap together pretty easily. Occasionally, I used a small mallet and very carefully hammered some of the more difficult pieces together. To imitate the Balsam Hill Village, I decided to paint the roofs with hazelnut brown chalk paint and to leave the body of the houses in their natural wood state. I had also picked up a package of wood trees at Hobby Lobby that only cost $2.50. I wanted 2 packages, but there was only 1 left. I painted these 3 trees with some moss green chalk paint. To dress up the wood risers, I used a pencil to draw some snowy slopes, and then I painted them in with white chalk paint. I also painted the top and side edges of all 3 risers. I decided to leave the natural wood showing on the remaining portions. Next, I hot glued some green Chanel pipe cleaners to embellish each of the houses a little differently. Sometimes I arranged it like garland, and sometimes I formed it into small circles like a wreath and added a bow made from red and white baker's twine. I still wanted to add some more trees, so I bought 2 packages of 3D tabletop decor at Dollar Tree, and I cut the tabs off the bottom of the trees. I painted them with fern green chalk paint, and then I hot glued them to the front of a few of the houses. I spent about $10 on all the extra little embellishments. Finally, to add lights to the houses, I bought 3 sets of Dollar Tree twinkle lights, 1 for each riser. I hot glued the battery pack to the upper back corner so it would be easy to access. Then I drilled a small hole in the back of each house. To get 1 strand of lights to span all of the houses on each riser, I only inserted 1 light per house. But because the door and window openings were so large, 1 light was more than enough. I ended up spending about 1/4 of the cost of the Balsam Hill Village, and my Christmas village is actually larger.
I just tell you that I have really been feeling my age lately. I never felt old until I turned 50. And then almost overnight, I felt like I was falling apart. So I knew I needed to make some changes. And one of the first things that I did was I started taking a high quality multivitamin. Because the truth is that no matter how balanced your diet is, it's hard to get all the nutrients your body needs from food alone.
Ritual brand Essential for Women Over 50 was designed to help fill those nutrient gaps with 8 key nutrients that support healthy aging. The Ritual multivitamin promotes heart health, bone health, brain health, eye health, muscle function, and immune function. And if you don't love Ritual after 30 days, they'll refund your money, no questions asked.
So if you'd like to try Ritual vitamins, use the link in my description box and the code Canterbury Cottage 40 to get 40% off your first month. That's the best price I've ever seen. So if you're feeling your age like me, why not give them a try?
For this next Christmas village, I ordered a different set of wood houses from Amazon, but these are much smaller. However, they did have to be assembled in much the same way as the larger ones. This time, I removed the roof panels and then painted the houses with red chalk paint. While the paint dried, I traced around the roof pieces on a sheet of poster board and cut them out. Then I used Mod Podge to glue them to the top of each roof piece. This would cover up the star cutouts and allow me to cover the roofs with fake snow or glitter. My plan was to attach the houses to a metal wreath form, so I drilled 2 holes in the bottom of each house. This allowed me to run a piece of florist wire through the holes and then around the wires to attach the houses to the wreath form. But if I were to do this project over again, I would try using a styrofoam wreath form instead. Once I had 5 houses attached, I snapped the roof pieces back on. Then I brushed over them with Mod Podge and sprinkled on white glitter. Next, I added 6 bottle brush trees from Walmart. They had round plastic bases that I was able to push through the wires of the wreath form, which held them upright, but I needed to twist a little florist wire around the tree bases and the wreath wires to keep them from sliding around. Before I added anything else, I wanted to make sure I added twinkle lights to the houses. I used the Dollar Tree lights again, which aren't very long, and one strand just wasn't quite long enough to reach all 5 houses, so I did have to use 2. I just pushed the lights through the holes I had drilled in the bottom of the houses. Next, I began filling in the bare spots by hot gluing moss to the wires of the wreath form. Then I decided I wanted to add some additional greenery, so I cut a couple moss-covered styrofoam balls in half and adhered them to the underside of the wreath, pushing them partially through the wires and then hot gluing them in place. I also added a few sticks, some faux berries, and pine cones. Since the house roofs were snowy, I thought the top of the trees should look snowy too. So I sprayed them with adhesive and sprinkled on a bit of faux snow. For this next project, I'm using an old mailbox. I started by spray painting it dark green. I also spray painted 3 thrift store Christmas houses with white primer and then brushed on a couple coats of white chalk paint. To create some height for the church, I hot glued a block of wood inside the mailbox and then hot glued the church on top of the piece of wood. I painted the wood with some white chalk paint to help it blend in. And when the paint was dry, I applied some spray adhesive both to the church and to the block of wood and sprinkled on some white glitter. I used hot glue to attach 2 more houses and some village figurines, mostly purchased at Dollar Tree. To create a pond, I hot glued a silver candle stand to the lid of the mailbox, and then I painted the lid with a couple coats of white chalk paint. It would have been easier if I had done this first. I wasn't liking the silver candle stand, so I pulled it off and replaced it with a Dollar Tree mirror that I popped off its handle. To create a snowy effect, I covered the mailbox lid with white caulk, which I just spread around with my finger. And while the caulk was still wet, I sprinkled on fake snow. To dress up the top of the mailbox, I wired on some pine branches that I had cut from an old Christmas tree, and then I made and attached a bow. I drilled a small hole in the back of the mailbox and pushed a string of Dollar Tree battery-operated lights through the hole, hot gluing the battery box to the back of the mailbox. I realize that not everyone has an old mailbox lying around, but just think, what unusual container do you have that could be turned into a Christmas village? I love creating Christmas villages in unusual containers like mailboxes and old clock radios. For this project, I removed all the screws on the back of the clock, then removed the back cover. I decided to leave the clock parts because the clock still worked, but I removed the radio speakers. Then on the front side, I began removing the speaker cover. I wasn't expecting to find a hard plastic grill underneath the fabric, so I began hammering it out as best I could. Once I had removed the majority of plastic, I used my angle grinder to sand down any rough spots. I had purchased 2 little Department 56 Christmas houses at Goodwill for 99 cents, and I hot glued them into the opening. I needed to use a little piece of foam board to level out an area for the second house. Then I used small pieces of packing styrofoam to fill in a gap along the front of the clock and hot glued it in place. I printed out a Christmas scene on cardstock, cut it out, and used spray adhesive to adhere it to the back of the clock radio. Then I printed out another copy of the same Christmas image, only this time I cut it in half. I used spray adhesive to adhere half of the image to the inside side wall of the radio, and I glued the other half image to a piece of foam board to create a partition between the opening and the clock parts. The foam board fit snugly in place. Then I reattached the back cover. I added a couple bottle brush trees and a street light to the scene. Then I glued some sparkly pipe cleaners around the opening to clean up that ragged edge. I also added some white pipe cleaners along the inside top edge and to fill the cracks between the sides and back walls. I sprayed the little houses with adhesive and then sprinkled on some iridescent glitter. Then I sprayed some adhesive on the area in front of the houses and added some fake snow, pressing it down into the adhesive. Finally, I printed out a Christmas phrase on a small slip of cardstock, cut it out, spread some Mod Podge on the front and sprinkled on some iridescent glitter, and hot glued it to the front of the clock radio. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope you'll let me know which Christmas village idea you like best. And don't forget to use my link and the code Canterbury Cottage 40 to get 40% off your first month of Ritual Vitamins. And here's another idea for creating a unique Christmas village.